When my wife smirked across the oak table and said, "Sign the papers, you get nothing," she didn't realize her own arrogance had already given me everything. That oak table had been in our home in Charlotte for 20 years. We bought it at a consignment shop back in 2002 when money was tight, and every purchase meant sacrifice. I refinished it myself, sanding the scratches, brushing on varnish until it gleamed. That table saw birthdays, family dinners, arguments, reconciliations. Now it was the stage for my execution. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell me where you're listening from. She slid the divorce packet across the polished wood like a dealer throwing down losing cards. Her nails, manicured bright red, tapped on the corner of the stack. The perfume was stronger than usual, floral and sharp, the kind you spray on when you want to feel powerful. "Here's the deal," she said, voice smooth and practiced. "You sign, you walk. I keep the house, the workshop, the savings, the Tahoe, and the lake timeshare. You'll get a small courtesy stipend for 6 months if you don't make trouble." She smiled wider. "You never understood the numbers anyway. Let the people who do handle it." Every word landed like a hammer on bone. Not just the marriage, my life's work, my workshop, my retirement. The place where my 17-year-old son, Luke, learned to hold a ratchet and listen for a misfiring cylinder. I saw his face for a flicker, grease smudge on his cheek at 12, telling me he could smell bad gasoline. If I signed, what exactly was I teaching him? About loyalty, about legacy, about what a man protects. I kept my mouth shut and studied the packet. Petition for dissolution of marriage glared at me from the first page. My throat tightened. 30 years reduced to black ink and boxed check marks. She leaned back, eyes narrowed, lips curved. "You drag this out," she went on, "and my lawyer will seek exclusive use of the residence, a restraining order for the shop, and interim control of the accounts. Don't set be emotional, Finn. Be practical." I traced the edge of the oak, grounding myself in something solid while the floor shifted, the silence stretched. That's when it happened. As she reached into her purse for her phone, a folded slip slid free and fluttered to the floor. She didn't notice, but I did. I bent, picked it up, and unfolded it. A hotel bill. The logo read the Grand Bohemian Hotel, Charlotte, room service for two. Total $2,812.74. Date September 16th, 2022, a Friday night. The same Friday she told me she was at a women's sips networking retreat. Line by line, 2 bottles of champagne, oysters, steak for two. Breakfast the next morning. Late checkout, romance package fee. The numbers sat there like teeth marks. I looked up. She was scrolling through her phone, smirk unchanged. No idea what had just slipped out. "Tell me, have you ever seen the truth fall straight into your hand, like a bill sliding from a pocket?" I folded the receipt and slid it into my back pocket without a sound. My hands were steady now. Not from calm, but from aim. The denial of the last months, the late nights, the cold bed, the sudden obsession with Pilates and me time, calcified into something simple proof. "Are you going to sign or not?" she snapped, finally meeting my eyes. "You're not going to hold this family hostage because of your pride. Luke deserves stability, and I set the stable parent." Luke. The name hit me like a wrench to the ribs. He was at a friend's place, cramming for a physics test, and texting me about torque and pulleys. He didn't know that while he was solving problems on paper, someone was trying to take away the place where we learned how to solve them in life. "I said I'll think about it," I said, voice even. She scoffed. "You always think about it. That's why we're here, your small thinking. Sign them by Friday. Otherwise, you know what happens." She tapped the packet again, slow and deliberate. "And Finn, don't try any of your garage heroics. I've already changed the locks at the house. I can change them there too." She stood, adjusted her blouse, and kissed the air near my cheek like we were colleagues wrapping a meeting. On her way out, she paused at the doorway and delivered the last twist of the knife. "I'm meeting with a realtor at 10 a.m. tomorrow. We'll need you out of the office by the end of the week so we can get accurate numbers for valuation. You'll get a copy." The door clicked. Her heels faded down the hall. The house was too quiet. I sat alone at the oak table. The packet stared back. The varnish reflected the ceiling light like a polished mirror. I could see my face in it, older than I felt. Lines I didn't remember earning. 30 years compressed into this moment. And on the other side of it, the face of my son asking if I gave up. I took the packet and placed it neatly in a manila folder. Then I grabbed my keys. My workshop smelled like it always did. Motor oil, steel, old leather, honest smells. I flipped on the office light, sat at the battered desk, and pulled the hotel bill from my pocket. I slipped it into the top drawer beneath invoices, underlined the date with a red pen. September 16th, 2022, the night she lied. I opened the safe title copies, tax returns, payroll summaries, a worn photograph of Luke at 12 holding a carburetor like a trophy. I set the divorce packet on the desk and looked at the clock on the wall, 10:38 p.m., and the calendar beside it. October 2022. I circled today's date in red. Not a funeral, a marker. I closed my eyes for a breath. Then I started a list in my notebook. House deed, mortgage balance, business license, payroll records, supplier contracts, bank statements. Not a police report, just a mechanic's checklist. Find the rattle, trace the sound, tighten the right bolt. On the way home, I stopped at a 24-hour copy shop on South Boulevard. I made 3 sets of the divorce packet and asked for a receipt, $28.41. I wrote the time on it, 11:52 p.m., and tucked it beside the hotel bill. Paper doesn't argue, it just waits. When I got back, the house was dark. Her phone glowed on the nightstand, face down. I watched her sleep from the doorway. For a second I remembered the girl at a 91 barbecue who laughed when I got grease on my cheek. The one who said yes when I had a half-running Chevy and a dream of a workshop. Then I remembered the line she'd thrown at me, casual as lint. I keep the house, the workshop, the savings, and the bill that said what she really kept was a room at the Grand Bohemian and oysters for 2. I turned away, went downstairs, and placed the folder on the oak table where it had started. My thumb rested on the grain I'd finished 20 years ago. A table is a tool, I thought. Depends what you build on it. I wasn't just a betrayed husband anymore. I was a man with evidence, and I knew something she didn't in her rush to take everything. She'd already made the first mistake, not the hotel bill that was proof of a heart. It was something subtler, written in ink, hiding where arrogance always hides. I switched off the light and let the house go quiet. Somewhere in the dark, a boy slept who needed to learn that men don't sign away their legacy. They defend it with patience, with paper, with truth. And that's exactly what I was going to do. The locks clicked shut behind me like a final verdict. It was early November in Charlotte, the air sharp with the kind of cold that makes you pull your jacket tighter even indoors. I came home one evening from the workshop, grease still under my nails, to find my house key no longer worked. The brass cylinder resisted me, refusing entry. I jiggled it, pressed harder, but the truth was simple. She had changed the locks. I knocked once, twice, then harder. My son Luke opened the door a crack. His face was pale, his eyes darting behind him like a soldier caught between 2 enemies. "Dad," Mom said, "you're not supposed to be here right now." His voice cracked, and my chest caved in. I forced a smile, even though my jaw was clenched so tight it ached. "It sets still my house, Luke. Tell her I just need to grab some things." Before he could answer, she appeared in the hallway, arms crossed, phone in hand like a weapon. "You don't live here anymore, Finn. You can call your lawyer if you have an issue." Her tone was honey poured over poison. "Don't drag Luke into your drama." The door closed. The deadbolt slid into place. That night I slept in the small office at my workshop, the hum of the old refrigerator my only company. I laid on the worn-out couch with an oil-stained blanket pulled up to my chin. For years that shop had been where I fixed broken engines. Now it was where I tried to patch a broken life. The next morning I checked the mailbox at the shop. Among invoices and flyers sat a white envelope, bold red letters on the outside, notice of eviction. My heart sank as I unfolded it. Dated November 10th, 2022. Addressed to both of us, the mortgage was 3 months overdue. $699,842 still owed. I circled the date in red on my office calendar. November 10th, a cage drawn in ink. Thanksgiving came like a cruel joke. The table that once overflowed with laughter and turkey was now a battlefield of silence. She sat at one end with Luke beside her, his fork clinking nervously against his plate. Ellen, my sister, sat to my left. She was the only one who still looked me in the eye. "Pass the potatoes," Ellen said softly, trying to break the ice. But the air was heavy. My wife didn't look up once, her lips set in a thin line. Luke barely ate. The tension was thicker than the gravy. I wanted to tell him everything, to explain the eviction notice, the hotel bill, the changed locks, but his shoulders were already hunched, burdened by a weight he didn't deserve. So I stayed silent. Silence became my cage. Every day another bar locked into place, the eviction notices piling up, the utilities cut off because they were in her name, the whispers around town when she was seen with a business associate at restaurants I couldn't afford. I carried each document back to the workshop like contraband. I slid them into my drawer, each one filed neatly under a red tab. Every slip of paper felt like a nail in a coffin, but also a piece of ammunition. My silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was gathering strength. Still, there were nights I broke, nights I sat alone at the workbench, staring at the framed photo of Luke holding a carburetor when he was 12. His grin so wide, so sure. I whispered apologies to that boy, promising him his father wasn't done fighting. Tell me, have you ever lived in a silence so loud it roared in your ears? That's what those weeks felt like. On November 24th, Thanksgiving Day itself, I marked the eviction date again on the calendar, this time circling it twice in thick red ink. That circle wasn't just a deadline. It was a reminder this cage wouldn't hold me forever. I may have lost my home, my bed, my place at the table, but I hadn't lost the one thing she underestimated: my resolve. And as I lay on that workshop couch that night, the smell of oil thick in the air, I realized something. Silence wasn't just a cage, it was also a forge, and I was becoming steel. I carried my life into Anderson's office in a cardboard banker's box, manila folders labeled in my block handwriting: mortgage, utilities, payroll, TKs, divorce packet, copy A. December rain pinned Charlotte to a gray sky, and the lobby smelled like wet wool and coffee. His receptionist, Paula, glanced at the red circles on my calendar printout and gave me that look. People give a man walking in with a storm under his arm. Anderson shook my hand like he meant it. "Finn," he said, "let's get you warm and factual." His conference room was all glass and law books. He wore a navy suit and a tie that didn't try too hard. On the table he set out a legal pad, a yellow highlighter, and a pen that clicked with a clean, decisive sound. "Start with what matters most." I slid the hotel bill across first. "The Grand Bohemian," I said. "Two people, September 16th, $2,812.74. He didn't blink at the number. He looked at the date, then wrote it down. "Good," he said. "It sets proof of conduct, not a headline. What else?" I handed him the eviction notice. November 10th, 2022. Past due statements. The mortgage figure $699,842 remaining. A photocopy of my $28.41 copy shop receipt, timestamp 11:52 p.m., the night I duplicated the divorce packet. He stacked them carefully, corners aligned like they were already part of an exhibit. Then I placed the packet she sat slid across the oak table on top of everything. "She wants me to sign by Friday," I said. "Says I get nothing. House, workshop, savings, Tahoe, timeshare, hers." Anderson exhaled, not a sigh, more like a valve releasing pressure. He cracked the packet open and started reading aloud under his breath, boring through paragraphs the way I listen to an engine, tuning out the noise until the true sound reveals itself. "Look here," he said, tapping page 2 with the pen. "Petitioner," he traced a line with the highlighter like he was underlining a tripwire. "Petitioner Finrod Callahan." He looked up at me. "Did you file first?" "No," I said. "She just shoved these at me." He nodded once, a flicker of something like amusement surfacing. "Then her lawyer recycled a template that presumes you are the petitioner." Sometimes arrogance is zen, it just loud, it's so lazy. He flipped to a section buried halfway through, the one I'd skimmed and hated but hadn't understood. He read it once, then again, slower. His highlighter slid across a line and left a bright yellow blade of light. Clause 6 Kiss, he said, and read it out loud like a judge. The petitioner retains full business ownership of any sole proprietorship operated by date of separation, including all tools, accounts receivable, and goodwill SFS. He looked me in the eyes. Do you hear it? I blinked. The room felt suddenly smaller. Petitioner retains full business ownership. The words rolled over me like clean water. But if I didn't hit file first— We're filing now, he said, already clicking the pen. Today, we'll file a complaint for absolute divorce and equitable distribution with you listed as plaintiff petitioner. It's standard to use those terms interchangeably here, but the clause in her draft keys off petitioners, not defendant, not respondent. If she insists this is the agreement, she's insisting the business stays with whoever holds that title. He sat back, a small smile in the corner of his mouth. We're going to make sure that's you, and then we're going to make them read their own sentence in open court. Would you have noticed one line that could save your life? Is that legal? I asked, even though I knew he wouldn't gamble on a trick. I fix engines. He fixes documents. It's their language, he said. Her counsel circulated it. We'll memorialize everything correctly. Your business existed long before date of separation. You're sole proprietor. Licenses in your name. Payroll under your EIN. Vendor contracts under Callahan Vintage and Customs. No magic, just facts. And we'll file a motion for temporary relief to protect the shop from interference pending final adjudication. He turned to Paula through the glass and held up 2 fingers. Then the packet. She came in with a scanner cart, like a surgical nurse. Scan this into case file, Callahan by Callahan, he said. Tag clause 6C. Already creating the folder, she said, sliding pages into the feeder. Anderson kept reading. Clause 9, personal property. Clause 12, spousal support. He snorted softly. They want you to pay spousal support while she's running up hotel bills? We'll subpoena card statements and hotel logs if we need them, but we won't lead with anger. We lead with paper. Mila's. He laid out the plan, each step as clean as a torque sequence. December 2nd, 2022, file complaint and motion for temporary relief. Seek exclusive control of business, access to work premises, and a restraining provision to prevent asset dissipation. December 5th, 2022, serve notice. December 9th, 2022, first calendar call. Request early mediation date. Ongoing assemble Exhibit A, business ownership proof. Exhibit B, mortgage delinquency notices. Exhibit C, hotel bill. Exhibit D, utilities shut off in her name. Exhibit E, payroll and vendor affidavits. January, counterclaim for attorney's fees if conduct supports it. March, trial readiness. Courtroom is set piece, not theater. Truth is dramatic enough. He handed me a blank affidavit form. Write the timeline in your voice. Keep it sparse, dates, amounts, places, etc. September 16th, 22, I discovered a $2,812.74 hotel bill. We stand in front of a notary. We shall attach it as affidavit of Finn R. Callahan. I stared at the highlighter line glowing on clause 6C. I'm a man of parts and torque specs. But ink has its own physics. A single line can carry the load of an entire life if it's drafted right. Finn, Anderson said. Softer now. She changed the locks to make you feel shut out. We e-filed at 3:14 p.m., December 2nd, 2022. Paula printed the confirmation, Mecklenburg County File Number 22 CVD 71438. I underlined the number on my notes the way I underline a VIN after a rebuild. I slipped the confirmation into my folder behind the hotel bill. 2 pieces of paper that together sounded like an engine catching after months of sitting cold. On my way out, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Have you signed yet? Be smart, Finn. Don't make this ugly. No name, just that oily tone people use when they think you're already beaten. I took a screenshot, saved it as img_2703, and emailed it to myself with the subject harassment divorce. Paper doesn't argue, it accumulates. That evening, I drove back to the workshop. Rain streaked the roll-up door, neon from the diner across the street fluttering on the wet asphalt. I set Anderson's printouts on my desk, next to my notebook checklist. I added a new line, Clause 6, yellow highlight. Then I drew a small key beside it, just for me. The office clock ticked towards 7. Somewhere across town, she was likely telling someone about how practical this all was, how amicable it would be if I stopped being emotional. I pictured the oak table, the way her nails tapped the packet, the way she said, "You get nothing," and I felt nothing but the calm that comes from torquing ahead in the right sequence. 1, 2, 3, never skip, never over-tighten. Let the metal settle between passes. My sister Ellen called. "I don't want to overstep," she said, voice low, but I overheard something at the grocery store. She was on the phone by the rotisserie chickens, telling someone, "Once he signs, we're free in January." Ellen paused. I think she meant him literally signing as part of the plan. "It was," I said, and told her about Clause 6C. She went quiet, then let out a small, fierce laugh. "So she handed you the match and the firewood." "More like the breaker bar," I said. "The bolt set's still tight, but it set's moving." After we hung up, I pulled my calendar off the wall and flipped to January 2023. On January 10th, I wrote "Mediation window opens." On March 12th, I drew a clean red circle and pressed the pen until the paper bruised. That date wasn't official yet, just a shape in my head, but it felt like the day a man would stand up in a courtroom while a judge read a line written by the other side, and the room would hear the sound of arrogance hitting concrete. I locked the office and stood in the dark of the shop, letting the smell of oil and rubber steady me. This wasn't about crushing her. Revenge, as I was learning, wasn't flame. It was a boundary. It was naming what was mine and keeping it. The shop, the keys, the boy who grew into a man holding a carburetor like a trophy. One line, hidden in ink, had become a beam I could stand on. The cage I'd been living in wasn't just made of silence. It was made of not seeing, now I saw. And once a man sees, he doesn't unsee. I slid the e-file confirmation behind the hotel bill, closed the drawer, and turned off the light. Rain tapped the roof like fingers counting down. Somewhere, a door I couldn't yet see was already unlocking. Christmas lights twinkled across Charlotte that December. But my world stayed dim. I drove through neighborhoods where families strung reindeer on lawns and blow-up Santas swayed in the cold. But for me, December wasn't about presents. It was about patience. And patience, I had learned, was its own kind of gift. At the workshop, I kept up appearances. To my employees, I was tired but steady. To Luke, I was the dad who showed up for basketball practice, even if I sat alone in the bleachers. To her, I was the man too beaten to fight. But behind the scenes, I photocopied every bill, every eviction notice, every statement she thought would bury me. On December 15th, 2022, a utilities shutoff arrived addressed in her name. Final notice, termination scheduled December 22nd, 22. I made 2 copies. Slipped the original in my red-tabbed folder. Each document was a brick, and I was building my wall. One evening, Ellen stopped by the workshop. She carried 2 cups of coffee and that protective look sisters wear when they see a brother bruised but breathing. She set the coffee on my desk, then leaned against the file cabinet. "Finn," she said. "I heard her today." Phone pressed to her ear in the parking lot at Harris Teeter. I was 2 cars over. She didn't see me. Ellen Sepp's voice dropped lower. "Do once he signs. We set her free." Sepp's what she told him. Said it twice. "Once he signs, we set her free." I didn't have to ask who him was. I pulled out the photocopy of the divorce packet Anderson had marked with highlighter. Clause 6 Kier glowed like a warning flare. "She thinks the signing will be my surrender," I said. "She doesn't know it sets her signature that set'll undo her." Ellen smiled, sharp and fierce. "Then let her keep thinking it." Christmas Eve landed heavy. I was invited but not welcomed. The oak table stood dressed with red candles and green garland. Luke sat between us, shoulders tight, pretending the silence was just a holiday pause. She poured herself wine, her diamond earrings catching the light from the chandelier. Each sparkle was paid for by bills that bore my name. I unwrapped the tie. Luke bought me a navy blue one, he said. Would look professional in court, Dad. My throat tightened at his choice of words. He was only 17, but he knew battles don't end at dinner tables. They end where truth is weighed and signatures matter. She handed me a box, too. A crisp shirt from Nordstrom, the tag still dangling. So you don't look like you just crawled out of an oil pit, she said lightly. Luke's fork froze in the air. I just folded the shirt and nodded. Let her think the insult landed. But I had brought my own gift. Not for her, not for Luke, but for myself. After dinner, I slipped upstairs to the study and opened my briefcase. Inside, neatly stacked, were copies of every document: the hotel bill, the eviction notices, the utilities shut-off, the mortgage slips, and on top, the divorce packet with clause 6 edge highlighted in yellow, glowing like a lantern. I sealed the folder shut with a red ribbon I pulled from an old toolbox drawer, a mechanic's Christmas bow. Then I tucked it back into the briefcase and snapped the locks closed. That was my gift. A gift not meant for tonight, but for March. When I came back downstairs, Ellen caught my eye. She knew. She always knew. Luke pulled me aside before I left. His voice cracked in the dim light of the porch. Dad, I don't know whose side to be on. His eyes glistened, fear and loyalty warring inside him. I put my hand on his shoulder. You don't have to choose right now, son. Just remember, truth doesn't need sides. It stands on its own. He nodded, but I saw the battle-carving lines in his young face. A boy forced to grow up at a table where silence was thicker than gravy. That night, back at the workshop, I sat at my desk and stared at the briefcase. It sat on the floor like a time bomb, ticking down to March. I wrapped a small tag on the handle and wrote, "To Finn, from Patience." Tell me, have you ever wrapped up a secret so tightly that it burned in your hands not to open it? For her, Christmas was about flaunting. She wore new jewelry, bought gifts with my dwindling accounts, and laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. For me, Christmas was about silence, about letting her believe the stage was hers while behind the curtain I set the props for her fall. On December 26th, Ellen texted me, heard them again. She called him baby. Said January will be clean once the ink dries. I saved the message, screenshot, date stamped. EMG_2729. Another exhibit waiting in the drawer. The city sparkled that week with fireworks and Christmas lights, but my workshop stayed dark except for the glow of my desk lamp, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the rafters. It was a monk's cell, and I was rewriting scripture. Because if Christmas is about gifts, then mine wasn't wrapped in shiny paper. It was bound in manila folders, tied in ribbon, and locked in a briefcase. My gift was patience. My gift was proof. And I was saving the unwrapping for March. January sharpened everything. The cold, the sky, my focus. I woke on January 3rd, 2023, before sunrise, brewed coffee in the workshop kitchenette, and laid out Anderson's checklist like torque specs. Affidavit signed, business license copy. Vendor letters, payroll summaries, bank statements, clause 6, highlighted. I slipped everything into the briefcase I'd tagged to Finn. From Patience, snapped the locks and drove into uptown Charlotte with the heater rattling and the radio off. Silence wasn't a cage anymore. It was a tool. Anderson met me at 8:10 a.m. Navy suit. The same decisive pen. We file your counterclaim this morning, he said, ushering me into the glass conference room. We're not just defending Finn, we're asserting business stays with you under the clause in her draft. We also ask for temporary exclusive possession of the shop and a restraining order on asset moves. And today we formally request attorney's fees based on conduct. He leaned in, no fireworks, just paper. Paula wheeled in the scanner cart. The red LED ticked digits as our pages slid through like a press minting money. I signed the affidavit of Finn Callahan in front of their notary at 8:37 a.m., A small stamp thunked the page with the rectangular authority of the state of North Carolina. The sound was perfect, clean, official, unarguable. Next, Anderson said, tapping his planner, we set mediation. ICEP requested January 24th. If they stall, we document it. If they posture, we let them. Either way, we aim the case at March. He handed me a one-page letter on firm letterhead, notice of counterclaim in motion for temporary relief. The language did not swagger. It didn't need to. It cited case number 22 CVD 71438, reference clause 6C, and attached exhibits A, E like stepping stones across a flooded street. I initialed the bottom corner and thought of Luke learning to initial school forms, slow, careful, aware of what a signature means. Tell me, have you ever felt your backbone stiffen just from seeing your own name printed where it finally belongs? We e-filed at 9:12 a.m. Confirmation pinging Paula Sipp's monitor. Service goes out by noon, she said. They said'll have it before lunch. They did. At 12:31 p.m., my phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number that didn't bother to hide its contempt. Cute move, Finn. This will cost you. No name. I screen capped it, IMG_2746, and forwarded to Anderson harassment post-counterclaim. He replied with one word, received. That afternoon, I drove past 131 South Tryon, the high glass tower where her lawyer kept offices. On the sidewalk below, I saw her, my wife, in a camel coat, laughing too loudly with a man in a navy peacoat who was not a lawyer and not a colleague. He put a hand on the small of her back, and they walked toward the valet. She didn't see me idling at the light. I didn't honk. I didn't roll down the window. I watched the valet open the door of a charcoal BMW, and watched the two of them slide inside, perfectly framed by their reflection in the building's mirrored facade. Arrogance always loves a window. At 4:05 p.m., Ellen called. You okay? She asked. I'm better than okay, I said, and told her about the counterclaim, about mediation on the 24th, about the temporary motions. She let out a breath I didn't know she'd been holding. Good, she said. Then you should also know this. I overheard her again by the rotisserie chickens. Say sesh signing on the 6th, this she told him. Say sesh she told him seshed. Then we shift assets before he wakes up. Sesh, she said, say sesh, before he wakes up, sesture, said it, before he wakes up, seshif, Finn. January 6th? I repeated, brain turning that date like a lug nut. She sipped, staging a signing. We're going to be awake, Ellen said. Wide awake. On January 6th, I showed up right on time to the very meeting she'd arranged, a faux settlement signing at a neutral office suite on East Moorhead. The conference table wasn't oak, but it was long and shiny, and she sat at the far end of it, framed by a wall of abstract art and the self-satisfaction of someone who thinks they're winning. Finn, she said, cool as chilled wine, today we put this to bed. You sign, we process the paperwork, and we all get to move on. Her lawyer slid a stapled packet across, stipulation of property division, that looked like a cousin of the draft I'd already filleted with Anderson. I picked it up, thumb to the back, then laid it down as gently as a bomb. I ones that be signing this, I said. Her smile didn't crack. It curdled. Excuse me? I kept my voice even. We filed a counterclaim on January 3rd. We have a motion for temporary exclusive control of the business, pending final adjudication. Mediation is set for January 24th. I'm prepared to discuss settlement in good faith at mediation. Today I'm not waiving ownership of my shop. Petit coast durst. For a long beat, the room went so quiet, I could hear the ventilation system breathing. Then her lawyer cleared his throat and tried the script. Mr. Callahan, your wife is offering a very generous. Clause 6 et, I said, not raising my voice. In the version your office circulated, the petitioner retains full business ownership. S. You named me petitioner. We preserved that in our filings. Her eyes flicked, a tell that always preceded her temper. This is your stunt. No, I said. This is your language. She stood so fast her chair scraped a long, ugly line across the carpet. You don't get to play smart all of a sudden, Finn. You fix cars. She jabbed a finger at the packet. I fixed this. I slid a copy of the Mecklenburg County file confirmation across the table, the one stamped December 2nd, 2022, 15:14. It's SEP's already fixed, I said. By the rules you brought into the room. The signing that was supposed to put me to sleep ended with her storming out and her counsel mumbling about conferring with client. I stepped into the hall and texted Anderson a single word, done. He called 30 seconds later, laugh in his voice that wasn't unkind. Let them feel it, he said. We'll be professional on the 24th. In the days that followed, she doubled down in public. That's what arrogance does when it senses a boundary. It performs. She posted photos at Supperland in Plaza Midwood, a 14-ounce ribeye in a hand with that same navy peacoat sleeve in 3 frames. She tagged no one and wrote, "New chapter, new taste." I didn't reply. I saved the post as PDF_2023_01_10 for context, not for court but for truth's own record. Meanwhile, I worked. I showed up at 7 a.m. to open the bay doors. I signed receipts. I leaned under hoods and taught Luke, when he came by after school, how to listen past the noise for the misfire. We didn't talk about her posts. We talked about PSI and EGR valves and the way a good engine evens out when you've done the sequence right. On January 18th, Anderson emailed me, temporary hearing set 202 9 o'clock a.m., Judge Ortiz. Prepare Exhibits AE. Bring originals. I printed the email and paper clipped it to the front of the red tabbed folder. I put the folder in the briefcase. I checked the locks twice. That weekend, Ellen came by with a bag of groceries and gossip she hadn't asked for but kept overhearing. He's younger, she said, of the man in the peacoat and useful until money runs out. She told him, the shop is the big fish. Ellen's eyes went flinty. Once upon a time, that shop bought her candles and birthdays. Now it's just a fish to spear. It sets not her fish, I said. It sets a boat I built one plank at a time. Tell me, have you ever realized the thing they're trying to steal is the same thing that taught you how not to let them? On January 24th, we sat down to mediation in a quiet room with a neutral attorney who wore sensible shoes and the expression of someone who's seen worse. The mediator separated us into caucus rooms, shuttled offers back and forth, and put decaf in front of me like I was on a long drive. Her side's first offer, house plus 70% of business valuation plus spousal support. I smiled without humor and slid our opening. Business 100% to me per clause 6he, house to be sold with proceeds applied to arrearage. No spousal support, each pays own fees with a line at the bottom. Open to adjustments on personal property to expedite closure. By noon, the mediator returned with a sigh that smelled like stale coffee. They SIP are not moving off business, she said. They think they can jam you at the temporary hearing. We shall see them there, Anderson said, already marking 202 again in his calendar with a heavy stroke. After the mediator left, he tapped the highlighter again on clause 6 say. We don't set bluff, Finn. We build temporary hearing as a hinge, not the door. That night, I stood alone in the dark shop and flipped my wall calendar to February. I drew a small red circle around 202 and then below it, retraced the heavy halo around 3/12 until the paper nearly tore. The circles weren't threats. They were promises to myself. As January closed, she escalated the theater. Louder laughter, brighter photos, colder eyes when we passed in the courthouse corridor. But the rope she'd woven out of contempt and carelessness was tightening. Every public display, every text, every bill in her name. I wasn't pulling it. I was letting gravity do what it always does. The counterclaim wasn't a punch. It was a stance. My hands stayed open, ready for a fair settlement, but my feet were planted. If we were destined for a room where words mattered more than noise, then I would bring words you could hold in your hand. Dates, amounts, clauses, stamps. And when we walked into that courtroom in March, I wanted one thing more than victory, clarity. The kind you can hear when an engine settles into its true rhythm and the whole car stops shaking. January gave me that rhythm. It took the man I'd been tired, locked out, sleeping on a couch, and put a key back in his hand, not the key to a house, the key to a life. Next came February, when heat and pressure make metal stronger or make it snap. I knew which one I was, and I knew she didn't set. February came in cold and brittle, like steel left too long in frost. Every morning I unlocked the shop at 7 a.m., the padlock heavy in my hand, and every evening I stacked more papers into the red-tabbed folder. Bills, notices, statements, each one proof that her arrogance wasn't just destroying me, it was destroying herself. On February 2nd, 2023, the first temporary hearing landed. Judge Ortiz presided, stern and efficient, her black robe a wall no one could scale. Anderson stood beside me at the petitioner's table, his notes crisp, exhibits in order. My wife sat across the aisle with her lawyer, whispering into his ear, her face painted with confidence like a mask. Her counsel spoke first, asking the judge for exclusive control of the business to stabilize family finances. He called me volatile and unreliable, citing missed mortgage payments and utilities shutoff. Anderson didn't raise his voice. He slid Exhibit A across business license dated 2004, sole proprietor, Finn R. Callahan. Exhibit B, vendor contracts in my signature. Exhibit C, payroll affidavits from 2 employees swearing I signed their checks. Exhibit D, the $2,812.74 Grand Bohemian bill in her name. Exhibit E, utilities shutoff dated December 22nd, 2022, also in her name. Then he tapped the highlighted line. Clause 6C. Your Honor, these are not my client SIP's words, Anderson said. This is their clause, their draft, their oversight, and their arrogance. The judge read it aloud, slow, precise. Petitioner retains full business ownership of any sole proprietorship operated to date of separation. Silence crackled. I could feel the heat rising from her seat across the aisle. Her smirk faltered for the first time. Judge Ortiz did not make final rulings, but she granted temporary exclusive control of the shop to me until March. She denied spousal support pending further evaluation, and when her lawyer tried to argue, she raised a hand and said simply, "The language is clear." We walked out of that courtroom with nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, just momentum. But the fire inside me grew. Back at the workshop, eviction notices kept arriving, one on February 6th stamped in red, final notice. Eviction set for March 1st. I circled the date in red ink on the calendar beside my desk. The circle bled through to the next page. Luke saw it when he came by after practice. "Dad," he asked softly, "are we gonna lose the house?" I didn't lie. "Maybe," I said, "but not the shop. Not what I built." He nodded, jaw tight. He didn't say he'd picked a side. He didn't have to. Tell me, have you ever looked into your child's eyes and seen your own fight reflected back at you? Ellen kept feeding me scraps of overheard truth. At the bank, she caught my wife on the phone. "Once the house is gone, he'll fold. Then we'll finish him in March." Ellen texted me the words, time-stamped February 9th, 4:17 p.m. I saved it as IMG_2782. But folding was the one thing I refused to do. On February 12th, I met Anderson again. We sat in his office while the city outside was washed in Valentine's Day pink. He laid out the path. Eviction is painful but survivable. Mortgage deficiency rolls into her name if we show payments lapsed under her watch. March 12th remains our trial date. That's the circle you drew in red, right? I nodded. He smiled, then held that circle like a finish line. Everything between now and then is noise. But noise has weight. The utilities were cut again. Gas this time. I showered in cold water at the shop. Steam replaced by my own breath in the mirror. I shaved over a sink that stank of oil. I told no one. I just kept filing the notices, each one a match dropped into a pile she thought would burn me. She never realized I was building a bonfire behind her. By February 20th, word in town spread. Customers whispered about her dinners with the man in the peacoat, about her boldness at restaurants, about her loud laughter masking desperation. One even slipped me a napkin with a date written on it. February 18th, Fahrenheit rooftop bar. Saw her there, the man said. Not subtle, I kept the napkin, folded it into my folder. Another piece of kindling. On February 25th, Ellen called again. She told him, "The chad, March is ours." He sat stunned. Ellen Set's voice cracked with anger. She doesn't Sets know you with already turned March into your month. That night I sat in the dark workshop with only the glow of the desk lamp. The calendar showed March 1st, eviction date, looming, and beyond it, March 12th, circled thick in red. Two dates. One meant loss. The other meant justice. I tapped the pen against the paper until the ink bled. I wasn't afraid of losing the house anymore. The house was walls and locks that she changed without hesitation. The shop that was bolts and tools and grease and sacrifice. You can change locks on a house. You can't change the ownership written in ink. As February ended, I felt the fire rise. Not wild, not reckless, controlled, deliberate. The kind of fire that forges steel, because by the time we reached March, she wouldn't be walking me into a cage. She'd be walking herself into a courtroom. And that seps where the real blaze would start. March 12th, 2023. A Sunday night storm had rolled through Charlotte, washing the streets clean. By Monday morning, the sky was crisp blue, the kind that looks honest even when people aren't. I arrived at the courthouse early 8 a.m., sharp, my briefcase in one hand, my son Luke walking beside me in his only suit. His tie was crooked, but his shoulders were squared. "Dad," he whispered, "you don't Set have to win everything. Just keep the shop." I gripped his shoulder. "Luke, this isn't Set about winning everything. It's Set is about keeping what Set is mine and showing you what a man protects." Inside, the courthouse smelled of polished wood and coffee gone cold. The walls hummed with footsteps and whispers. Courtroom 5B was our battlefield. Polished benches, a high ceiling, the seal of North Carolina above Judge Ortiz's seat. I sat at the petitioner's table with Anderson. My wife swept in moments later with her lawyer and the man in the navy peacoat trailing behind like a shadow. She wore a cream suit, her hair immaculate, her smile too bright for a Monday morning. At 9:04 a.m., the bailiff called the case. Callahan v. Callahan, case number 22 CVD 71438. Her lawyer rose first, posture tall. "Your Honor, we request exclusive control of marital assets, including the business known as Callahan Vintage and Customs, to ensure financial stability for Mrs. Callahan and her dependent child. We further request spousal support, division of equity from the marital residence, and attorney's fees." I clenched my jaw but said nothing. Let them talk. Let the rope spool out. Then Anderson stood. No theatrics. Just steady authority. "Your Honor, the opposing counsel speaks of stability. Let us begin with clarity. Their own draft agreement, circulated by their office, contains Clause 6C. He tapped the exhibit binder, flipping to the page already highlighted. Petitioner retains full business ownership of any sole proprietorship operated prior to the date of separation. My client, Finn Callahan, is the petitioner of record in this matter. Judge Ortiz adjusted her glasses and read the line aloud for the record. The words echoed like a verdict before the verdict. Petitioner retains full business ownership. Her lawyer stammered, tried to pivot. "But, Your Honor, the spirit of the agreement was—" "The language is plain," the judge interrupted. "And it is your language, counselor." That was the first gasp. A ripple through the benches. Even the bailiff's eyebrows twitched. Anderson didn't pause. He laid out Exhibit A, business license dated 2004, signed by me. Exhibit B, vendor contracts, all under my name. Exhibit C, payroll affidavits notarized, stating I signed every paycheck. Exhibit D, the $2,812.74. Grand Bohemian Hotel bill, dated September 16, 2022, in her name. Exhibit E, utilities shutoff notices addressed solely to her, including the December 22 gas termination. Then he placed the eviction notice on the table. $699,842 mortgage arrearage, 3 months overdue. The judge flipped through the papers, her face unreadable. Your Honor, Anderson said, voice calm but sharp. They claim financial stability as justification for control. But these notices show mismanagement. They claim marital fidelity as justification for support. But this hotel bill speaks louder than their arguments. They claim the business as theirs, yet every piece of evidence, including their own language, proves otherwise. Today isn't about winning everything. It's about preserving what was already his. The judge looked over her glasses at opposing counsel. Do you dispute the authenticity of these documents? Her lawyer shifted, sweat blooming at his temples. No, Your Honor. But context, authenticity, she repeated. No, Your Honor. And that was the second gasp. My wife's smirk faltered. She leaned in toward her lawyer, whispering furiously. He shook his head, lips tight. Anderson was done. He motioned to the witness stand. We call Ellen Parker. My sister walked forward, steady as stone. She swore the oath, sat, and looked directly at my wife. Her voice didn't shake. On December 23, 2022, I overheard Mrs. Callahan on a phone call in the Harris Teeter parking lot. She said, once he signs, we're free in January. On February 9th, 2023, I overheard her again at the same store. She said, before he wakes up, we'll shift assets. Both statements were made in public spaces. I recognized her voice. There was no mistake. Anderson slid Ellen's written affidavit across to the judge, signed and notarized February 10th, 2023. My wife sits face flushed crimson. She half rose from her chair, but the judge sips his gavel tapped once, sharp. Sit down. When it was my turn, I stood. My voice came low, steady, confessional. Your Honor, I'm not here to destroy her. I'm here to keep what I built. Callahan Vintage and Customs isn't just a garage. It's my retirement, my legacy. It's where I taught my son to work with his hands, where every receipt is a record of sacrifice. 30 years of marriage should mean partnership. Instead, I was locked out of my home, told I'd get nothing. While hotel bills and eviction notices piled up in my name, I stayed silent for months. I circled dates on my calendar in red ink. Evictions, hearings, trial. I didn't come here for revenge. I came here for justice. Tell me, have you ever watched a liar choke on their own signature? The judge flipped back to Clause 6 one last time. Her voice rang out, the language is unambiguous. Ownership of Callahan Vintage and Customs remains with the petitioner, Mr. Callahan. Gasps, murmurs. Even a stifled laugh from the back row. The sound rolled through the courtroom like a wave. Anderson sat, calm as ever, but I could see the flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. My wife's hand trembled as she clutched the edge of the table. The man in the navy peacoat shifted uncomfortably on the bench behind her. For the first time, she looked smaller than the room she tried to command. The judge continued. The issue of spousal support is denied based on conduct. Custody will be addressed separately, with preference for stability and financial accountability. Attorney Sipp's fees will be reserved pending final order. The gavel struck once. Court adjourned. I exhaled for the first time in months. My chest felt light, not because I had won, but because the truth had been spoken out loud, in a room where it couldn't be twisted anymore. Luke gripped my hand so tightly my knuckles ached. Dad, he whispered, tears pooling in his eyes. You did it. I squeezed back. No, son, we did it. As we walked out, Ellen fell into step beside me. You hear that sound, Finn, she said softly. What sound? The gasp. That Sepp's the sound of arrogance collapsing. We stepped into the March air like surfacing from deep water. The courthouse doors swung behind us and the world sounded new, car alarms chirping, heels on concrete, a city that didn't know it had just watched a life tilt back toward balance. She blasted out a moment later, cream suit blazing against the brick, the man in the navy peacoat half a step behind her, his face a study in Sipp's remorse. She spun on him, voice sharp enough to cut. Why didn't you say anything in there? He glanced at me, then at the courthouse, then down at his shoes. Because it was your clause, he said, low. Because you told me he set fold. Her mouth opened, then closed. The diamond studs in her ears looked suddenly heavy. She reached for his arm, but he took a half step back like gravity had shifted. "I can't carry this," he said. "I'm not signing up to be the headline in your divorce order." He looked past her toward the street. "I need clean." And just like that, the peacoat dissolved into traffic. No dramatic exit, no speech. Just a man who realized the check was coming to the table and he didn't have the card to pay. "Tell me, have you ever watched a person discover in real time that consequences have your name on them?" Ellen touched my elbow. "You stir done here," she said gently. "Go to your place." "My place," I repeated, like a man trying on a word he hadn't felt in months. Luke walked beside me to the truck. He didn't say much, he didn't have to. He stared at my key ring like it was a medal. The brass shop fob caught the sun, scratched and honest. I'd rubbed those edges smooth over 19 years of opens and closes. We drove down South Tryon and cut over to the strip where the shop sits, brick and steel, and a faded mural of a '67 fastback I painted with a buddy back in '05. The roll-up door was still down, and for a brief second habit told me to brace for the padlock that had been threatened by lawyers and drafts and arrogance. But there it was. My lock, my key, my door. Luke hopped out first, jogged to the side door, and waited. I slid the key in and felt the clean, simple click I'd missed more than I'd admit. The smell hit me first. Oil, rubber, coffee, burnt residue in the breakroom machine, a faint citrus from the cleaner Luis insists on for finished interiors. Honest smells, smells that don't lie. "Boss." Luis called from under a lifted Chevelle, his voice echoing off steel. He ducked out, wiped his hands, then stopped when he saw my face. "You good?" I held up the briefcase, then set it on the counter like a trophy I didn't need to display. "The judge read their clause," I said. "Business stays with petitioner." I tapped my chest once. "Me?" For a beat the shop held its breath. Then the sound broke. The ratchet click-click-click of a tech who couldn't help himself. A whoop from the back, a palm thumping the fender of a project car like a drum. Luis laughed and put a grease print on my shoulder. I decided never to wash out. "Back to sequence," I said, and it came out steadier than I felt. "No changes. We finished the Chevelle today. We call Mrs. Jansen about her Tahoe at 3 p.m. We reorder gaskets from Hinson before 4:30. So we're not dead on Monday." I turned to the whiteboard, parts numbers, due dates, initials. I uncapped the marker and wrote returned in the corner with the day's date March 13th, 23. A childish flourish maybe, but I'd earned it. Luke wandered into the office and ran his fingers over the framed photo of him at 12, the carburetor like a trophy in his hands. "I remember this day," he said. "You told me the trick with engines is listening past the noise." I looked at him, at the man he was becoming, jaw tighter than mine at 17 and eyes older. "It works for life too," I said. He turned, swallowed once, and then hugged me so hard the breath left my lungs. "I settin' with you, Dad," he said into my shoulder, voice hoarse. "I settin' with you." I closed my eyes and let the weight of that sentence settle where the worry had sat for months. Some words you carry, some words carry you. The day moved like a machine that had been paused mid-cycle and now resumed without complaint. I called Mrs. Jansen at 3:02 p.m. "Ma'am, we're buttoning up and we'll have you on the road by 5. I signed for a parts delivery, invoice hash $11,478, $386.20, and slipped the pink copy into the metal file where we keep weeklies. I rang out a small job, break bleed $119.95, and wrote the receipt with the same block letters I used on affidavits, both acts weirdly holy in their own way. Around 4:15, Ellen arrived with a box of donuts that looked like they were chosen by a committee of 8-year-olds. "For morale," she said, setting them on the counter like a nurse delivering good medicine. She squeezed my arm, then stole a maple bar and ate it like she had a personal vendetta against sugar. Not everything was clean. My phone buzzed twice with numbers I didn't recognize and didn't answer. A voicemail arrived, 42 seconds of venom I didn't need to hear to understand. I saved it anyway, VM_031323_1631, and emailed it to Anderson with the subject line "Post-order communications. Paper doesn't gloat, it just holds." At closing, I took the roll-up door chain and pulled. The door rattled down with that same satisfying rumble it's had since 2007, when we replaced the tracks, and I swore we'd keep it maintained like a heart valve. I slid the deadbolt, set the alarm, and turned to Luke. "Dinner?" he asked. "At the diner," I said. "Tradition." We slid into a corner booth at Carroll's on Park, the kind of place where the waitress calls you on and means it. Luke ordered a bacon cheeseburger the size of a steering wheel. I took meatloaf like a man who'd earned the right to sit without a briefcase at his feet. Across the room, a couple scrolled past a news site, headlines about things that break other people's lives. Ours wouldn't trend. Our victory was small as a clause and large as a life. Luke wiped his mouth and got serious in that way. Boys do when they step her tiptoeing into manhood. "What happens now?" "Now we finish," I said. "House gets sorted. Judge writes the final order. Your mom figures out her life without my shop in it. We pay our vendors on time, we keep promises, we make the engines right. We don't set gloat, we don't set threaten, we don't set post. We work." He nodded, satisfied with the simplicity. He'd learned the hard way that simple is not the same as easy. When the bill came $28.64, I paid in cash and kept the receipt. Habit, yes. Also ritual. I slipped it into my wallet next to the hotel bill copy. Not as a trophy, but as an echo, one receipt that broke a lie, another that paid for a meal with my son, after truth stood up in a room and cleared its throat. We walked out into the evening and stood for a minute under the diner's neon, the red and blue letters flickering on our faces. The city hummed. Somewhere she was recalibrating, her orbit suddenly missing the center she had planned to steal. Consequences would take their time. They always do. Back at the shop, I paused with my hand on the doorknob of the office. The briefcase sat on the desk, closed. I rested my palm on the leather and let the day replay, the gasp, the claws, the way Luke's arms locked around me like a promise. "Ready?" he asked from the doorway. "Yeah," I said. "Let's go home." Home wasn't walls and locks anymore. Home was a set of keys that fit, a room that smelled like work, a boy who chose to sit across from me and eat a burger that dripped onto the plate. Home was a clause I didn't write but learned to live by. Petitioner retains what he built. Tomorrow we would tune an engine that idled a little rough and return it smooth. Tomorrow I'd call the mortgage servicer and give them the judge's words. Tomorrow I'd keep the receipts of payments, of promises, of a life that had been bent but not broken. Tonight I turned off the office light, locked the door, and felt the click in my bones. The final order came on March 20th, 2023. 1 week after the courtroom gasps still echoed in my ears, a thin envelope, plain white, stamped from Mecklenburg County, slid under the workshop office door with the morning mail. My hands didn't tremble as I slid it open with a flathead screwdriver. It felt too much like the hundreds of envelopes I'd opened before: invoices, part catalogs, tax reminders. Only this one carried the weight of years. The order was blunt, written in that language judges use where mercy and finality share the same page. Callahan Vintage and Customs is hereby awarded to petitioner Mr. Finn R. Callahan as sole property, free of claim. Petitioner is awarded primary custody of minor child Luke Callahan, with visitation granted to respondent. Petitioner's request for attorney's fees is granted, with respondent to pay $18,740 in costs incurred. I read it twice. The words were bricks, solid, unmoving. When I stepped out of the office, the crew was already gathered around the Chevelle we sip in finishing. Luis looked at my face, then at the envelope in my hand. "Well?" "It's such as ours," I said simply. "The shop custody, fees, all of it." For a second the silence was heavy. Then the shop erupted. A ratchet clattered to the floor. Someone whistled low. Luis slapped the hood of the Chevelle so hard it rang. I wasn't a man who smiled much those days, but I let the corner of my mouth break. Ellen arrived an hour later, carrying a bag of bagels and that fierce grin she saves for family victories. She held up her phone. "Already heard," she said. Word seps out. She lost the shop. She lost the shop. She lost custody. She lost fees. Justice isn't set about loss, I said, but my voice cracked anyway. It's set it's about balance. Luke came by after school. He walked into the office, still in his varsity jacket, and saw the order lying open on the desk. His eyes scanned the words fast, then again slower. When he looked at me, there was no doubt left in him. "She can that take it from you?" he asked. "No," I said, "not anymore." His shoulders dropped, tension unwinding. He let out a breath that sounded like he's been holding it all season. Then he grinned, wide and boyish. "Then let's rebuild the Mustang together." It wasn't stat about the Mustang. It was about us. Tell me, have you ever seen justice wear a face you recognize? Not a robe or a gavel, but your own child's grin. Outside, the fallout began. Friends she once paraded around vanished. The man in the navy pickle was gone. No more dinners, no more rooftop bars. Her social posts went quiet, then disappeared. A reputation can crumble faster than concrete when arrogance holds it up. I didn't gloat. I didn't post. I just worked. Each receipt I signed, brake job, oil change, carb rebuild, felt like adding another stone to the foundation she thought she'd strip away. The workshop keys were heavy in my pocket, the same ones she once threatened to change. Every jingle was a reminder locks can be turned, but ownership is written. At dinner that week, Ellen lifted a glass of sweet tea and said, "To patience, to proof, to justice." Luke raised his soda, eyes shining, to Dad. I raised mine last. "To balance, may we keep it." The toast wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. Justice doesn't need volume, it needs weight. And now it had a face, hers, pale with shock when the judge read Clause 6C, and mine, steady with the knowledge that I hadn't lost myself. Spring came to Charlotte, slow, green buds cracking the branches along South Tryon, the air sharp with cut grass and rain. I sat once more at the oak table, the same one where she'd smirked, where she'd slid the papers and told me I'd get nothing. The same table where a hotel bill had slipped into my hand like fate. Only now the table was quiet. The papers gone, the smirk erased. On its surface sat one thing, my workshop keys, heavy, scratched, honest. I traced the worn brass with my thumb. They had been threatened, taken, almost stolen on paper. But now they were mine again, beyond dispute. Luke walked in, taller every day, a faint shadow of stubble on his chin. He set down a greasy rag and said, "Mustang Sep's almost there, Dad. You want to check timing before I button it up?" I looked at him and saw not just my son, but a man who had watched silence turn into fire, who had seen lies unravel in a courtroom, who had chosen his father's side not because of blood but because of truth. "Yeah," I said, rising. "Let's do it." But before I left the table, I let myself sit in the reflection. Tell me, have you ever looked back at a battlefield and realized the war didn't just strip you down, it showed you who you were meant to be? I thought of every circle I'd drawn in red ink, eviction, hearing, trial, each one a bar of a cage that turned out to be a ladder. I thought of the hotel bill, $2,812.74 that exposed her lies, of the mortgage notice, $699,842 that showed her recklessness, of the eviction threats that came with her name on them, not mine, of Ellen's voice, steady and sharp, overhearing the phone calls where my wife confessed her plan, of Anderson, reading Clause 6A out loud like scripture, of the gasps when the judge said, "Ownership remains with petitioner." Every detail had built to this, not luck, not revenge, proof, patience, resolve. I looked out the window. She lived across town now, in a rented condo smaller than the master bedroom she once lorded over. The man in the navy peacoat was gone. Her social pages were quiet, and the people who once laughed too loud at her dinners avoided her in grocery aisles. Consequences don't post selfies. They just arrive. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate her downfall. Justice isn't about watching someone fall. It's about standing where you belong. Luke leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. "You okay, Dad?" I nodded. "Better than okay, balanced." He smiled. "Coach says I could get a scholarship if I keep my grades up. I was thinking maybe mechanical engineering." Pride swelled in me, thick as the smell of oil in the shop. Whatever you choose, son. Remember this truth doesn't need volume. It needs weight, and once Yusef got it, no one can take it. He nodded, serious, as if the words were bolts he was threading into place. I picked up the keys and slid them into my pocket. They jingled with the weight of years, and I thought of the line I'd carried through the fire. You didn't lose me, you gave me away. She gave me away the moment she dropped that hotel bill, the moment she smirked across this table, the moment she believed arrogance could replace proof. She gave me away when she forgot that every bolt, every tool, every receipt in that workshop was a piece of me. She gave me away when she tried to take my son's respect with signatures instead of honesty. And in giving me away, she gave me back to myself. Spring sunlight touched the oak grain, the same wood I'd refinished in 2002, back when we were young and hopeful. I rested my palm flat on it one last time, not as a battlefield now, but as a reminder. Tables hold history, keys hold future. I stood, walked to the shop with Luke, and bent under the hood of the Mustang. He handed me the timing light, his hands steady, his eyes clear. The engine turned, coughed, then roared to life. Smooth, balanced, true. We grinned at each other over the noise. Not because of revenge, not because of victory, but because of something simpler. We had held the line. The oak table stayed behind, the workshop keys in my pocket, the future ahead. And if you're listening now, remember this: you don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need to fight dirty to win. All you need is patience, proof, and the courage to draw your circle in red ink and stand inside it. Because in the end, she didn't take me. She didn't destroy me. She gave me away.